January 17, 1942. The Pacific dawn breaks over the cold, grey waters near Pearl Harbor. A low mist curls above the surface, swallowing the horizon in ghostly waves. Silence dominates, broken only by the distant, muffled roar of a naval engine. A massive silhouette emerges, steel and shadow, a battleship unlike the ones that dominate headlines, yet bristling with lethal promise. Its hull glints faintly under the weak morning light, each turret and cannon a monument to American engineering and resilience. On deck, sailors move with quiet precision, their breaths fogging in the chill air. Every step, every gesture rehearsed, the rhythm of a crew aware that the world has changed overnight. Just weeks earlier, the Japanese strike at Pearl Harbor had shattered complacency and thrown the U.S. Navy into uncharted waters. Yet here lies a vessel often overlooked, a ship whose true power and potential history has rarely credited. Its guns are ready, its armor tested, and its name whispered with understated respect among those who know. In the shadows of more celebrated giants, this battleship waits, silent, enduring, and underestimated, and soon it would prove that even forgotten giants can shape the tides of war. By the late 1930s, the world was already teetering on the brink of global conflict. Europe had been consumed by the expansionist ambitions of Nazi Germany, while Japan's imperialist designs in Asia had already destabilized the Pacific. The United States, still grappling with the scars of the First World War and the constraints of the Great Depression, maintained a cautious posture, focusing on defense rather than outright engagement. Yet naval planners knew that the next war would be fought not only on land, but across the vast oceans. Battleships, once the unquestioned rulers of the seas, were seen as both symbols of national power and crucial instruments of strategic dominance. American naval doctrine of the 1930s emphasized the development of fast, heavily armed battleships capable of projecting power across distant oceans. The Washington and London naval treaties had imposed limits on displacement and armament, shaping design priorities. U.S. engineers sought a delicate balance: speed, firepower, and protection. The resulting vessels were marvels of industrial ingenuity, combining thick armor belts with massive main guns, supplemented by an array of secondary batteries for close-range defense. Among these, some classes received more public attention and historical fame, particularly those later involved in headline-grabbing battles. Yet others, despite possessing comparable firepower and resilience, remained in relative obscurity. In the Pacific, tensions with Japan were escalating. By 1940, Japanese forces had solidified control over large portions of China and were eyeing further expansion into Southeast Asia. The U.S. responded with incremental measures: economic sanctions, embargoes on strategic materials, and naval repositioning. American intelligence anticipated the possibility of a direct strike against U.S. holdings, but few could have predicted the scale and audacity of the attack on Pearl Harbor. The shock of December 7, 1941, sent shockwaves through the Navy. Battleships that had once been mere components of a strategic deterrent were suddenly thrust into the front line of survival. Among these vessels, the most celebrated were the fast battleships and aircraft carriers that dominated headlines. Yet there existed a class of battleship often overshadowed, a ship designed with meticulous attention to armor distribution, gunnery efficiency, and operational versatility. Naval historians today recognize the technical excellence of these ships, but at the time, their contributions were often undervalued, overshadowed by flashier counterparts. Their decks held sailors whose skill and endurance would soon be tested under fire, in battles that demanded more than raw firepower: strategy, adaptability, and the courage to endure. The theater of the Pacific War was immense. From the coral atolls of the Central Pacific to the storm-tossed waters near Japan's home islands, control of the sea lanes was vital. Supply convoys, troop movements, and naval patrols depended on ships capable of both offense and defense. In this environment, every battleship mattered, yet some were more prominent in memory than others. The overlooked vessels, however, would play pivotal roles in critical engagements, often turning the tide of skirmishes that, in retrospect, determined the broader course of the war. The stage was set, a vast ocean, rising tensions, and a fleet preparing for conflict that would demand more than firepower alone. Among the steel giants, the overlooked battleship awaited its moment, a moment that would reveal the true measure of its strength, resilience, and the quiet heroism of its crew. The battleship in focus belonged to a class designed during an era when naval architects were striving to reconcile speed, firepower, and armor within treaty limits. Unlike some of its more famous counterparts, which emphasized sheer size or flagship status, this ship prioritized a balance that allowed it to operate effectively across the vast expanses of the Pacific. Its main battery consisted of 9 16-inch guns mounted in triple turrets, capable of delivering devastating broadsides at ranges exceeding 20 miles. Beneath the deck, its armor belt was engineered to withstand hits from both enemy shells and torpedoes, reflecting lessons learned from earlier naval engagements. Secondary armaments and anti-aircraft defenses were integrated meticulously, anticipating the rise of air power as a decisive factor in naval warfare. Construction began in the late 1930s at one of the nation's premier naval shipyards. The ship's keel was laid with careful precision, each steel plate and rivet following designs refined over decades. Naval engineers emphasized weight distribution, aiming for stability in the roughest waters while ensuring that the ship could maintain high speeds, up to 27 knots, without compromising structural integrity. By the time of commissioning in early 1941, the vessel represented the pinnacle of pre-war American battleship engineering. Formidable yet understated, capable of holding its own against any adversary, but lacking the glamour of headline-grabbing sister ships. Deployment of the ship followed strategic necessity. With tensions in the Pacific escalating, it was assigned to a forward-positioned fleet tasked with both deterrence and rapid response. Early war patrols involved reconnaissance missions, escorting convoys, and standing ready for engagements that might arise without warning. Unlike some battleships that saw immediate large-scale combat, this vessel's early role was characterized by vigilance, endurance, and preparation, qualities that rarely captured public imagination, but proved crucial in a theater defined by unpredictable encounters and sudden strikes. Even as the Japanese advance unfolded across Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands, naval commanders recognized the latent power of this battleship. Reports highlighted its superior gunnery accuracy, robust armor layout, and the professionalism of its crew. While other ships received public accolades following daring engagements, this vessel quietly accumulated operational experience that would later prove decisive. Each training exercise, each convoy escort, and each patrol strengthened the cohesion of the crew and honed the ship's performance under real-world conditions. By mid-1942, the Pacific theater had become a crucible testing every aspect of naval strategy. Aircraft carriers had begun to eclipse battleships in public perception, particularly after the shocking losses at Pearl Harbor and the dramatic carrier clashes at the Coral Sea and Midway. Yet, the overlooked battleship remained a vital component of the fleet's backbone. Its guns were unmatched in sustained firepower, its armor capable of absorbing punishment that would cripple lesser ships, and its presence alone could influence enemy movements. Commanders increasingly relied on such vessels to provide both offensive support and defensive cover, recognizing that the success of larger strategic operations often depended on these silent giants. In hindsight, the design philosophy that had once seemed conservative now appeared prescient. By emphasizing durability, versatility, and crew effectiveness over headline-grabbing speed or sheer tonnage, this battleship was uniquely suited for the attritional, multi-domain nature of the Pacific conflict. While history would celebrate carriers and fast battleships, those who understood naval warfare knew that ships like this one were indispensable. They bridged the gap between technological innovation and human endurance, between raw firepower and tactical reliability. The stage was thus set for the battleship to move from obscurity to critical action, its moment of recognition approaching amid the chaos of the Pacific War. Human angle. Life aboard a battleship was a test of endurance long before enemy shells entered the equation. Sailors lived in confined quarters, their routines dictated by the ceaseless demands of maintenance, drills, and watch rotations. On this particular ship, the crew's morale was quietly exceptional. Officers and enlisted men alike took pride in their vessel, recognizing that its understated reputation belied its capability. Each sailor understood that their actions, from calibrating a gun to monitoring engine output, could determine the outcome of a battle. The human element, the cohesion, discipline, and resilience of those aboard, was as crucial as the ship's armor or guns. Months of monotony at sea could give way to sudden, life-threatening engagements, and the crew's ability to remain composed under pressure became a decisive factor. Small acts, a gunner's precision, a lookout's vigilance, a helmsman's steady hand, accumulated to shape the ship's effectiveness, reflecting the deeply human dimension of naval warfare. Tactical angle. Strategically, this battleship was designed to fulfill multiple roles simultaneously: shore bombardment, convoy escort, and fleet engagement. Its speed allowed it to maneuver with carrier groups or respond to emergent threats across vast ocean distances. Naval tacticians recognized its versatility. Unlike slower, more heavily armored ships, it could be deployed flexibly, reinforcing weaker positions or exploiting enemy vulnerabilities. In the Pacific theater, where naval warfare depended on both gunnery duels and the protection of critical supply lines, such flexibility was invaluable. Commanders used the ship to control choke points, support amphibious operations, and engage enemy forces when needed. Its tactical value often went unheralded in public reports because the ship's missions were calculated, deliberate, and less sensational than dramatic carrier duels. Yet these missions were pivotal. They prevented losses, preserved fleet integrity, and positioned U.S. forces for decisive victories elsewhere. Technological angle. Technologically, the ship was a product of meticulous design and incremental innovation. Its main guns, capable of launching 2,700-pound shells over 20 miles, were paired with fire control systems that had been continuously refined since World War I. The armor layout reflected a sophisticated understanding of vulnerabilities. Vital areas, including magazines and engine rooms, were heavily protected, while the hull was reinforced to absorb torpedo strikes without catastrophic loss. Anti-aircraft defenses, initially underestimated by contemporary observers, became increasingly vital as the threat from Japanese carrier-based aircraft grew. Innovations in propulsion, ventilation, and damage control allowed the vessel to operate efficiently under strain, with redundant systems minimizing the risk of operational failure. In essence, the ship combined engineering precision with battlefield adaptability, a marriage of steel and strategy that few contemporaries fully appreciated. Leadership angle. Leadership aboard this battleship was a delicate balance between authority and inspiration. Commanding officers had to maintain discipline while fostering a sense of purpose among hundreds of crew members. Decision-making was often a matter of life and death, particularly when navigating the unpredictable waters of the Pacific. Skippers had to coordinate gunnery, maneuvering, and defensive operations simultaneously, often under the pressure of enemy fire or during night operations in limited visibility. Reports from the period emphasize that the officers of this ship excelled at integrating the ship's technical strengths with human capability. Their leadership was quiet yet decisive, earning the trust of the crew and ensuring that the battleship functioned as a cohesive, lethal unit. In many ways, the success of the ship reflected not just its engineering, but the effectiveness of those who commanded it. Enemy perspective angle. From the Japanese viewpoint, this battleship was often underestimated, an irony that would prove fatal in certain engagements. Intelligence reports frequently prioritized faster carriers or headline-grabbing battleships, assuming that lesser-known vessels posed minimal threat. Yet experienced Japanese naval officers who encountered the ship quickly recognized its resilience and firepower. Its ability to withstand sustained shelling, combined with accurate counterfire, forced adjustments in Japanese tactics. While public histories highlight victories and losses, the reality on the battlefield was nuanced. An overlooked ship could alter enemy calculations, delay offensives, or protect critical positions. In this sense, its underestimation by adversaries became a strategic advantage. a silent force multiplier that shaped engagements beyond its own immediate actions. Moral and psychological angle. The presence of a powerful but understated battleship also had significant psychological effects, both on its crew and allied forces. For the sailors aboard, the knowledge that they served on a vessel capable of withstanding punishment and delivering decisive firepower fostered confidence and cohesion. Allied forces operating alongside the ship could rely on it as a stabilizing element, a constant in the uncertainty of war. Conversely, enemy forces confronted not just steel and guns, but the resolve and determination of those who manned it. Morale in naval warfare is often overlooked in tactical analyses, yet it can decisively influence performance under fire. In this sense, the battleship's understated reputation belied its profound impact on human psychology, shaping outcomes in ways invisible to historians focused solely on tonnage or headline victories. June 4, 1942. The waters northeast of Midway Atoll shimmered under fragile dawn, the calm belying the chaos soon to erupt. Intelligence reports had indicated a Japanese offensive aimed at seizing Midway, a strategic island that could serve as a forward base for further expansion into the Central Pacific. Aircraft carriers dominated much of the attention, their planes and pilots poised to deliver the decisive strikes everyone anticipated. Yet quietly positioned in the outer perimeter of the task force, the overlooked battleship awaited its moment. Its guns, long trained in anticipation, were ready to shape the outcome. The initial hours of the Battle of Midway saw rapid aerial maneuvers, bombers diving from the clouds, and fighters weaving in deadly patterns above. Amid this aerial storm, the battleship played a supporting but critical role. Its anti-aircraft batteries opened fire with disciplined precision, creating a protective curtain over more vulnerable carriers and transport ships. Shells arced skyward, tearing into attacking formations and forcing Japanese pilots to adjust their approach. Observers later noted that without such defensive fire, carrier losses might have been catastrophic. The battleship's steady platform, capable of sustained operation under intermittent enemy attack, exemplified the quiet, methodical strength for which it had been designed. As the battle unfolded, Japanese warships attempted to close the distance, probing for weaknesses. The overlooked battleship, however, had been positioned for maximum tactical effect. Its main guns, firing with controlled rhythm, targeted advancing enemy cruisers and destroyers. Each salvo demonstrated not just raw power, but accuracy born of careful calibration and crew discipline. The ship's armor, tested in minor engagements during earlier patrols, absorbed near misses that might have disabled other vessels. Commanders observed that enemy captains often misjudged its capabilities, a miscalculation that resulted in delayed maneuvers and contributed to the broader success of U.S. forces that day. By mid-morning, the tide of battle was turning. Carrier-based aircraft inflicted heavy damage on the Japanese fleet, but the battleship's role was no less pivotal. It safeguarded key positions, absorbed enemy attention, and delivered counterfire that disrupted formations. For those aboard, the culmination of months of training and quiet service became palpable. The vessel moved with calculated efficiency, every turret, radar station, and lookout functioning in precise harmony. Its crew operated in unison, a human extension of the steel giant beneath them, proving that preparation and cohesion could rival the flash of carrier offensives in determining battlefield outcomes. The first half of the Battle of Midway thus illuminates the understated but critical function of this battleship. While carriers launched dramatic attacks that captured headlines, it was the combination of defensive firepower, precise gunnery, and tactical positioning that preserved fleet integrity. The ship, often overlooked in historical narratives, was proving the very premise of its design, that resilience, versatility, and disciplined human execution could decisively influence engagements that might otherwise have been catastrophic. As the sun reached its zenith on June 4, 1942, the Battle of Midway entered its most perilous phase. Japanese carrier forces, frustrated by earlier losses, attempted a coordinated surface and aerial assault to regain initiative. The overlooked battleship, positioned astutely by task force commanders, became the linchpin of the U.S. defensive perimeter. Its radar systems, still relatively new to naval warfare, detected incoming torpedo bombers long before they could visually identify targets. Alarms sounded, anti-aircraft crews rushed to stations, and the first volleys of flak erupted into the sky. The air became a chaotic lattice of smoke, tracer fire, and twisted metal, yet the battleship held its position with unshakable steadiness. Enemy aircraft pressed their attack relentlessly, diving through flak and attempting to target carriers hidden behind the line of battleships. The overlooked vessel absorbed repeated near misses, its armor preventing catastrophic damage and allowing continuous counterfire. Every shell fired disrupted enemy formations, forcing pilots to break off attacks or divert to less optimal targets. Historical after-action reports credit such ships with providing protective fire that likely saved multiple carriers from destruction. For the crew, the tension was palpable. Every salvo, every maneuver, every correction mattered. Minutes stretched like hours, each decision carrying the weight of life and death across the ocean. By late afternoon, Japanese surface ships attempted to close in on the U.S. formation, hoping to exploit perceived gaps. The battleship's main guns roared in a symphony of destruction, their range and accuracy preventing enemy cruisers and destroyers from advancing effectively. Multiple hits crippled smaller vessels and forced others to retreat, buying crucial time for carrier-based aircraft to regroup and strike decisive blows. Commanders later emphasized that the ship's firepower, often underappreciated in strategic assessments, created a buffer zone that fundamentally shaped the battle's outcome. Even as the chaos subsided, the human element remained critical. Damage control teams worked tirelessly to repair minor hull breaches and maintain operational readiness, demonstrating the crew's discipline and resilience under sustained pressure. The synergy of human skill and mechanical reliability allowed the ship to function as a platform of both offense and defense, fulfilling roles for which it had been meticulously designed but rarely celebrated. Each maneuver, each salvo, reinforced the lesson that in naval warfare, quiet consistency often outweighed dramatic heroics. As the sun set over the battered waters near Midway, the Japanese fleet had suffered a decisive defeat. Carrier losses were staggering, and the psychological blow reverberated across the Imperial Japanese Navy. Yet in the records of this pivotal engagement, the battleship remained largely understated, a silent contributor to victory. Its endurance, precision, and disciplined crew had turned it from an overlooked asset into a decisive force, proving that even giants hidden in the shadows could shape the course of war. The events at Midway would mark the beginning of a broader recognition of the ship's value. Its contributions, initially unnoticed in the public eye, had tangible tactical and strategic consequences, setting the stage for its continuing role across the Pacific campaign. The morning after the Battle of Midway, the Pacific waters bore silent witness to a conflict that had reshaped the balance of naval power. Japanese losses were staggering: 4 aircraft carriers sunk, hundreds of aircraft destroyed, and thousands of sailors lost. For the United States, the victory was decisive, halting Japan's expansion in the Central Pacific and granting the U.S. Navy a strategic foothold it would exploit over the next 3 years. Yet among the public, and even in some historical accounts, the spotlight remained firmly on the dramatic carrier duels and the pilots whose daring strikes destroyed enemy decks. The battleship, the silent guardian of the fleet, was largely absent from headlines, its contribution quietly monumental. Within the fleet, however, the ship's role was deeply appreciated. Officers recognized that its steady gunnery, disciplined anti-aircraft fire, and unyielding presence had provided a shield for more vulnerable vessels. Fleet logs and after-action reports highlighted instances where its guns had prevented torpedo attacks, disrupted enemy formations, and bought critical time for carrier operations. The understated battleship had functioned as a keystone in the U.S. defensive strategy, ensuring that the victory at Midway was not just tactical but operational. Sailors aboard understood this intimately. Their months of training and vigilance had translated into tangible outcomes, protecting lives and preserving the fleet's striking power. Beyond immediate tactical effects, the battle had broader psychological consequences. The Japanese Imperial Navy, long considered invincible at sea, was forced to reconsider its assumptions. Reports circulated among Japanese commanders noting the resilience of American vessels, particularly those not previously considered frontline threats. The overlooked battleship, underestimated by intelligence analysts, had survived attacks that might have crippled other ships and contributed to a shift in Japanese naval planning. The impact of this underestimation was strategic. It created operational friction, delayed offensive initiatives, and forced a reassessment of the risks associated with engaging U.S. forces in open waters. For the U.S. Navy, Midway served as both a proving ground and a lesson. The success of the carrier-focused strikes demonstrated the emerging dominance of air power at sea, but the endurance and reliability of battleships like this one underscored the enduring relevance of traditional naval firepower. The ship's ability to operate continuously, deliver precise counterfire, and absorb punishment without catastrophic failure reinforced the importance of balanced fleet composition. Naval planners began to recognize that the overlooked battleships provided a stabilizing backbone in an increasingly aerialized battlefield, a factor that would inform deployments and strategy in subsequent engagements. The human toll was also significant. Sailors aboard the battleship witnessed the destruction of enemy carriers, the loss of comrades in other ships, and the chaos of battle firsthand. Yet their survival, coupled with the ship's unbroken performance, instilled a profound sense of confidence and cohesion. Crews aboard other vessels, noting the ship's performance, developed greater trust in the fleet's capabilities. These intangible effects, confidence, morale, and operational reliability, shaped not just the immediate aftermath, but the long-term culture of the U.S. Navy in the Pacific, proving that heroism could manifest quietly, without fanfare, yet with lasting consequences. In the months following Midway, the overlooked battleship continued to serve as a critical component of the Pacific Fleet. Its presence in subsequent operations, ranging from the Guadalcanal campaign to the Solomon Islands engagements, demonstrated that its capabilities extended beyond a single battle. Naval records indicate that it provided sustained fire support during amphibious landings, protected supply convoys from surface and aerial threats, and engaged enemy warships with precision. Each mission reinforced lessons learned at Midway. Discipline, coordination, and resilience could amplify a vessel's effectiveness far beyond what public recognition might suggest. Strategically, the ship's performance influenced broader U.S. naval planning. Commanders increasingly appreciated the value of having versatile, well-protected battleships capable of both offensive and defensive roles. While carriers continued to dominate headlines and strategy discussions, battleships like this one were integral in maintaining fleet stability, enabling offensive operations and mitigating risk during prolonged engagements. Its contributions shaped tactical doctrines that emphasized combined arms operations at sea, integrating battleships, carriers, cruisers, and destroyers into a cohesive force capable of responding to multiple threats simultaneously. The Japanese Imperial Navy, meanwhile, adjusted its approach in response to encounters with resilient U.S. battleships. Intelligence reports acknowledged the damage potential of even lesser-known American vessels, highlighting a critical underestimation that had persisted in early engagements. Japanese strategists began altering fleet deployments, recognizing that U.S. battleships, once considered secondary threats, could decisively influence battle outcomes. This recalibration, though often overshadowed by carrier-centric narratives, illustrates how a single ship's performance can ripple through enemy planning, shaping the operational theater in subtle yet significant ways. Historians later noted that the battleship's understated role had a lasting legacy. Its crews, who had endured relentless patrols, enemy attacks, and logistical challenges, emerged with a reputation for professionalism and effectiveness. Veterans recalled the psychological assurance provided by the ship's presence, knowing that such a resilient platform stood between them and potential annihilation instilled confidence that enhanced overall fleet performance. In post-war assessments, naval analysts cited its operational efficiency, reliability under fire, and versatility as models for future warship design, influencing American naval architecture for decades. Yet despite these tangible contributions, the ship remained largely overshadowed in public memory. Its story, though documented in official logs and technical reports, rarely captured the dramatic narratives reserved for carrier battles or headline-grabbing engagements. The irony was that the vessel's very effectiveness contributed to its invisibility. By performing its duties flawlessly, it prevented disasters that might have drawn attention. Its legacy, therefore, is one of quiet heroism, proof that in war, not all victories are celebrated, and not all heroes are publicly recognized. As the Pacific Campaign continued to unfold, this battleship would repeatedly validate its design, its crew, and its strategic purpose. From defensive operations to offensive bombardments, its contributions underscored the enduring relevance of balanced naval power. And while history might emphasize the flashier elements of the conflict, those who served aboard knew the truth. In the vast expanse of the Pacific, quiet giants often determined the fate of fleets, and sometimes the war itself. In the vast theater of the Pacific, where waves stretched endlessly and horizons blurred into uncertainty, the overlooked battleship stands as a testament to the quiet power of preparation, resilience, and human discipline. It was not the fastest, nor the most celebrated, but it embodied a principle that remains timeless. True strength often lies in balance, reliability, and understated capability. Its steel hull absorbed punishment, its guns delivered precise force, and its crew executed with unwavering professionalism, reminding us that war is not only a spectacle of headlines, but also a crucible of endurance, skill, and cohesion. History often favors drama, carriers launching audacious strikes, pilots performing daring maneuvers, fleets clashing in explosive engagements. Yet the story of this battleship reveals a subtler truth. Heroism does not always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes, it is measured in the steady rhythm of gun crews, in the vigilance of watchstanders scanning the horizon, in officers making critical decisions under pressure that prevent catastrophe. Its overlooked contributions shaped outcomes, safeguarded lives, and influenced strategic decisions in ways that would resonate far beyond any single battle. Reflecting on its service, one recognizes the human dimension intertwined with technology and tactics. The sailors who lived, fought, and endured aboard the vessel transformed steel and machinery into action. Their resolve, courage, and cohesion turned an ostensibly modest ship into a decisive instrument of war. The psychological, moral, and operational impact of their service illustrates that in the chaos of conflict, the true measure of a ship is inseparable from the people who command, maintain, and inhabit it. Ultimately, the overlooked battleship reminds us that history is often shaped by forces and actors that escape immediate notice. Its story encourages a broader understanding of warfare, one that values preparation, adaptability, and the integration of human skill with technological design. In the end, the giant may be silent, its name seldom celebrated, yet its influence reverberates through naval history, proving that even in the shadows, greatness can endure and shape the tides of war.